Edict of Rothari, Anno Domini 643. Translated by Ocean Lang, Grand Historian, The Grand Lodge of New York in 1925. Section 144. Of the Comincini Master. If a Comincini Master with his associates, collegantes, shall undertake to restore or build the house of any person whatsoever, after an agreement shall have been closed as to payment, and it chances that someone should be killed, by reason of the house, through the falling of either material or stone, no claim shall be lodged against the owner of the house, in case the Comincini Master or those working with him, consortibus, shall fall to settle for the death or the damage done. Because who after having contracted to do work for his own advantage, must assume, not undeservedly, the damage done. Section 145. Of masters called or brought in. If any person shall call or bring in Comincini Masters one or several, to design a work or to daily assist his retainers, servi, at the building of his house, domune or casa, and it should happen that, by reason of this house, casa, one of the Comincines is killed, the owner of the house, casa, shall not be held responsible. On the other hand, if falling timber or stone should kill an outsider or cause injury to anyone, the fault shall not be imputed to the masters, but to him who called them in, and he should be responsible for the damage. A discussion of the importance of the Comincini Masters. Freemasonry, as we know it today, became public in 1717 in England when cathedral building was on the decline and the Operative Masons, or Freemasons, as they were known, started to accept as members those who were not members of the Mason's craft, calling them speculative Masons or accepted Masons. Freemasonry was brought to the United States by our early settlers with the earliest lodge of Freemasons in existence in Philadelphia in 1730. Now that we have heard the public version of the story, what about our roots? Where did we really come from? Well, there are many flavors of the story. National Treasure is a 2004 adventure film from Walt Disney Pictures that starred Nicolas Cage, and was an adventure movie about a search for lost treasure, involving stealing the Declaration of Independence, which led to a trail of clues and a backstory intertwined with the Knights Templar and the Freemasons. Many think that a more intriguing story about the beginnings of Masonry is synonymous with the history of the Templars. Even Masons themselves spice up our beginnings by using the setting of King Solomon and the Temple in Jerusalem in our ritual work, but remember it is only symbolic. Others try to trace our beginnings back to Egypt and the pharaohs. Although maybe there are some threads of reality to these historical possibilities, and maybe there was even some merging of ideas and practices in many of these ancient stories into modern practices that become parts of Freemasonry, but the real history and truth is never as exciting. What was so special about stonemasons? They possessed great skill to create the castles, cathedrals and palaces and the necessary sculpted works and ornaments demanded of their masters. Skill like these must have seemed almost magical to the mostly illiterate masses. They were clearly the elite of the labor force, had secret customs and marks and would have attracted some of the brightest non-educated recruits. Books written by Mrs. Lucy Baxter, The Cathedral Builders, in 1899, and W. Ravenscroft, England, The Comincines, their predecessors and their successors, around 1910, presented new theories. 1. Centuries before Christ and the foundation of Rome, a race of Hamitic descent spread along the Mediterranean shores and afterward became known in Syria and Asia Minor as Hittites, in Greece as Pelasgi, and in Italy as Etruscans. 2. Hittites were engaged in building the temple at Jerusalem, the fame of which spread far and wide. 3. The Romans learned their arts of building, decoration and pottery, etc. from the Etruscans, who were the same race as the Hittites, and carried with them some at least of their traditions. 4. In Rome developed the collegia of artificers, and in early Christian days these had traditions of King Solomon. 5. At the downfall of Rome the Guild of Artificers left and settled in the district of Como, holding as their centre the island of Comincini. 6. Afterwards they spread their influence over all Western Europe. 7. Then they merged into the great Masonic guilds of the Middle Ages. 8. As these guilds died out, their forms and ceremonies were preserved to a great extent in our Masonic lodges, especially those of the English and American constitutions. The arts and crafts of the Roman Empire were rigidly organized into guilds, or collegia, each of which had monopolistic control of its business, profession or handicraft. These were destroyed by the barbarians along with the towns and communities in which they were located, but a few of them, at Constantinople and in Rome particularly, survived the Holocaust. It is believed that a collegium, or a few collegia, of architects and their workmen took refuge on a fortified island in Lake Como, situated in the Lombard Kingdom of northern Italy. This region remained their seat and centre for centuries. Hence, their name, Comincini. The Commissine guilds were made free and independent of medieval restraints by their Lombardy rulers and set at liberty to travel about at will, and extended their influence and activities in the same way as other guilds, by invitation and contract, and by organization of lodges in new towns. The Lombards, who had come from northern Germany and settled in northern Italy in 568 AD, were good businessmen, but not architects or builders, and they employed the Commissines for this kind of work, and it was the Commissines who developed what is known today as Lombard architecture, covering a period that we may roughly put as from the 7th century to the Renaissance. After some time, the masters from Como, with abundant papal bulls, or diplomas, were granted the right of holding directly and solely under the Pope alone. Popes gave them their benediction, monarchs protected them, and the most powerful thought it an honor to be inscribed in their ranks. They with the utmost jealousy practiced all the arts connected with building, and by severe laws and penalties, perhaps also with bloodshed, prohibited others from the practice of building important edifices. They acquired the power to fix the price of their labor and to regulate their own internal government, exclusively in their own general chapter, prohibiting all native artists not admitted into their society from entering with it onto any sort of competition. Wherever they came, they appeared headed by a chief surveyor, who governed the whole troop, and named one man out of every 10, under the name of warden, to overlook the 9 others. The first mention of Comincini Masters was in an edict of 643 of the Lombard king Rothari, which by the Code of Rothari declared the indemnity that would be due should a house collapse which had been built by Magister Comicinus for a patron, ad opera, dictandi, commissioning the works. The reference has been interpreted as granting certain privileges to Magistri Comincini. The Code of Louis Brand, 80 years later, contains further provisions regulating the practice of Comincini, which had now become much more numerous and important. Fixed rates of payment were established for their services, varying according to the kind of building on which they were engaged. Definite prices being allowed for walls of various thicknesses, for arches and vaults, for chimneys, plastering and joiners' work. The difficulty which these early builders found in the construction of vaults is indicated by the allowance of a charge per superficial foot, from 15 to 18 times as great as in the case of a wall. The price of provisions and wine furnished to the workmen is also determined and is counted as part of their pay. The works of art between AD 800 and 1000 are greatly due to the brotherhood always faithful and often secret of the Magistri Comincini. In the Commissine ranks we find the 3 grades of novices or apprentices, operatory or craftsmen, and magistri. An Italian writer Cesare di Como, referring to these guilds, said, they were called together in the loggie, hence lodge, by a Grand Master to hear of affairs common to the order, to accept novices, and confer superior degrees on others. The chief lodge had other dependencies, and all members were instructed in their duties to the society and taught to direct every action to the glory of the Lord and his worship, to live faithful to God and the government, to lend themselves to the public good and fraternal charity. Strength, force and beauty were their symbols. Bishops, princes, men of high rank who studied architecture fraternized with them. From the 10th to the 13th centuries Grand Masters took oaths of discretion and fidelity. Masters coming from other lodges were received and employed, apprentices were not paid in the same manner as craftsmen, and all questions were settled in council. So, the Commissines had lodges, Grand Masters, secrets which they kept in a secret book called El Arcano Magistero. They wore aprons, dispensed charity, possessed means of identification, and employed much symbolism, some familiar to us, as King Solomon's knot, the Lion of Judah, the 2 great pillars, Jachin, and bows, square, compasses, mosaic pavement, etc. It is claimed that from this company of traveling masons is derived the fraternity of adopted masons, accepted masons or Freemasons. Finally, toward the end of the 11th century, the Commissine brotherhoods began to relax their bonds of union, to make room gradually for personality, and for artistic and scientific individuality, till they vanished at the close of the 15th century, with the disappearance of the Lombardic style which they had created, and the rise of the architecture of the Renaissance? It seems we have a chain extending from the Hittites, through the Roman collegia, through the Commissines to the medieval guilds of the Middle Ages, and our speculative lodges of today, with traditions and associations clearly handed on unbroken. We publicly trace our present organization back to the medieval cathedral builders. So if the Commissines were the parent body of these medieval cathedral builders, then are they really the grandparents of Masonry? We can only speculate on this. Whatever course Freemasonry actually followed, it has inspired millions of people across many countries for centuries and has attracted famous personalities from Europe, United States of America and the other continents. Providing that Freemasonry adapts to future times, explains its positive purposes and learns how to handle the media and its opponents, it will doubtless continue to endure for centuries.